Mike Kummer had struggled with IBS from a very young age and continued to have digestive issues even as a competitive athlete in his 20s. Join me as I talk to Mike about how he and his wife have integrated an animal-based diet into their family lifestyle on this week's episode of Hunger on Feast. Thank you for joining me today for another episode of Hunger Hunt Feast. With me is Michael Kummer. Michael, welcome.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it, Zane.
Absolutely. Michael and I met in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica last July 2021 at Paul Saladino's animal-based gathering. And we finally getting together on a podcast just to talk. We just really were, like many of the people there, we're just two very passionate people about, finding ultimate health, basically optimal health. And so whenever we get together, it's that conversation where you get to dig deeper with somebody who's already got a level of knowledge. And so that's what we're going to do today. But I want to kind of talk about how you came to this. I always think that's interesting to hear people's story about how they got to this diet, the journey they got there. And so what brought you to an animal-based diet, or whatever I see you got the carnivore shirt on. So it's, but I mean, nobody just, 10 years ago, this was not a thing.
Right.
Like keto was a thing, low carb was a thing, carnivore was not really, a thing. And so let's talk about, I mean, as I remember, you were a competitive athlete in Germany, correct?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
I used to sprint 100 meters back in the days.
Wow. So is that, you guys don't have sports at university, so you were competing like semi-pro or professionally, kind of club sports. Is that what it is?
That's how it started. And then the Austrian army, actually, I joined the army in 2000, I believe. And they have like this special program where they would support athletes that can represent the country. So I was actually in the army for 3.5 years, and as part of that, they basically paid the bills and allowed me to, compete for the country.
That's awesome. But you're from Germany, but you competed with the Austrian.
No, I'm from Austria. I
you're
speak
from Austria.
German, but I'm Austrian.
Right, you guys speak your German. Yeah.
Right.
But it's I for some reason I thought you were from Germany. I'm sorry. Okay, gotcha. So you came to the States and you were how long ago?
Well, I was not in shape, I can tell you that. But I came in 2007, and that was a couple of years after I stopped being a professional athlete, and I just, lived my life. I actually started an IT company in Austria, and failed. But that was kind of, I got distracted from, all the sports and all. I wouldn't work out anymore. Then I came to the US, saw this big opportunity, to help a company expand their US operations. And I tried to fully adopt the American way of life, including the diet, unfortunately. So my fridge was stocked with, I remember, Red Bull, because it's from Austria, so I had to have Red Bull.
It is from
but
Austria.
Also Coke and, pizza and all of the stuff that I haven't touched in a very long time. And so I noticed as I was getting older too, that my body would change, and not necessarily favorably, And,
yes, I do know.
And at some point in 2010, I got to know my wife now, and we saw a documentary, I think, on Netflix, Sick, Fat, and Nearly Dead, or something like that. It was something about added sugars. I guess that's what stuck in my head, how much added sugars we consume in this country, or worldwide, really, in most developed countries. And so we said, you know what, this is not good for us. We have to start removing product with added sugar. So we went through the pantry and carried out, carts full of stuff that had added sugar. We didn't know anything about paleo or any, specific diet. We just knew that added sugars weren't good for us. So that's how it all started. And then friends of ours, coincidentally, the guy was on a paleo diet, and he never really promoted it, or he was just different. Whenever we would go out eating, he wouldn't eat most of the things that we would choose for dinner or whatever. And I always thought, well, weirdo, but do whatever you do.
Yeah.
But at some point, it kind of sparked my curiosity, and I asked him questions, and I asked him, so can you eat this or can you eat that? And he's like, and I remember very distinctively, I think we were at Whole Foods, and I'm like, what about corn? And he said, corn, it's the kryptonite of paleo. And I'm like, why? You know, what's the problem with that? And so I started doing more research, and I'm like, and I remember we, my parents were actually over, and we spent a couple of days in Washington, D.C. And I woke up one morning in a hotel, and I told my wife, we're going to do paleo because we're going to end up dying painfully if we don't change the way we eat. And she was not happy about it whatsoever. She's Costa Rican, so she grew up on rice and beans, you know, and all of those things that are so not paleo. And but that's, you know, it took a little bit of an adjustment period, but then she started doing her research, and we kind of, you know, realigned and like, okay, this is really what we want to do. And so we started with paleo, and then it wasn't long after, maybe a year or 2 years after, and I said, you know what, paleo is not the answer, it's keto. We need to do keto. So, you know, cut out all of your sweet potatoes and all the paleo friendly carbs. We can't have that anymore. And so there was another adjustment period for her, because, you know, it was always me having those crazy ideas that, you know, that make you different to anyone else that's, you know, among, you know, friends and family and all.
Right.
And then, you know, we added fasting, started adding CrossFit, started paying more attention to sleep. And at some point I'm like, you know what, keto, that's not the thing either. It's carnivore. That's what you need to do, you know? So cut out everything except meat, basically. And he's like, you know, you gotta be kidding me. And I said, you know what, I'm gonna try this for a little bit and see how it is. And then, you know, we'll reassess and see if that's something that we want to do as a family, especially with 2 kids, you know, it's not only me.
Right.
And also because she's the one cooking most of the time. So whatever decisions I make impact her, if, you know,
For
to
sure.
some degree. And so I tried carnivore, pure carnivore for a while. And I'm like, you know, it's much like keto, not having any carbs, knowing that I, you know, at the time then when I started doing CrossFit workout once or twice a day, it's not sustainable. And I did it for at least the keto part for almost 3 years, you know, very low carb and working out intensively. And I'm like, you know, I can do it. I'm still perform better than most others, but I'm not reaching my potential, you know. There is something missing, you know. Just relying on the body to make glucose from non-carbohydrate sources is not very efficient, you know. And I thought it's the how it's supposed to be, but then I realized that's probably just a backup mechanism in case you don't have any carbs and not necessarily the mode that you want to be in, you know, for extended periods. And so we dived it back a little bit, realized that, you know, pure carnivore is not the way to eat either. And it was really around the time when we met that I'm like, okay, if Paul Saladino says you can have fruits and honey, then who am I to say, you know, you can't. So I started, you know, experimenting more with like a, you know, a combination of all of those dietary frameworks that I've tried and, you know, over the years. And, you know, we came kind of to it's an animal, very much an animal-based diet, much like, you know, Paul and probably you do as well, you know, with sweet fruits, with honey, even maple syrup, you know, and there are even some carbs that we have from time to time, be it sweet potatoes or maybe, you know, once in a while rice, but all depending on how we feel. If we feel like there is something off, be it from a digestive perspective or something else, we cut it out, you know. There are a lot of things that we definitely don't eat on a regular basis, leafy greens, you know, nightshades, nuts and seeds, you know, except, well, nuts and seeds, and then, you know, grains for the most part, again, occasionally rice, you know, but it's very much based on how we feel and based on the knowledge that we have of, you know, how certain plants are more toxic than others in terms of anti-nutrients, you know, and enzyme inhibitors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of, you know, how we base it on. And that's been working really well for us over the last, well, really, it's been almost a year that we've been doing this.
Great. Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah, I think when you really start paying attention to how you feel after you eat, think about what's causing bloating, what might disrupt your sleep, what affects your energy level or your ability to digest meat. You know, should you eat this with meat? If you're going to have it, should it be at another time? You know, and you start paying attention and get sensitive to how your body responds to food. You can really kind of find, it gives you some guidance as to what really benefits you the most, what causes the least inflammation, the most inflammation. So that's fantastic that you and your wife are able to figure that out together.
Right.
You know, and find, you know, I'm sure there's always, especially with couples, there's always some flexibility or give and take where one is a little more one way than the other, just because, you know, that's just how we are. And we need to do that to be
Right.
compatible.
Yeah,
You know?
no, that's exactly right. It's, you know, as long as you're at least in the same, you don't always have to be on the same page, but at least you have to be in the same book, you know?
Yeah, exactly.
If one is a carnivore, the other one's a vegan,
You got
I could see that
problems.
to be an issue, you know? I mean, I couldn't do it, you know, honestly.
Right. I'm with you. I
But
get it.
but
And as you
in
said,
terms
you
of,
guys
you know,
have,
how you feel, because you
yeah,
just mentioned it, the problem is that most people don't really know what it means to feel good,
they
right?
don't. Right.
And I know this from personal experience because I've dealt with irritable bowel syndrome and digestive issues for all of my life, and I just thought it's normal because my dad has had it, his dad had it in the past, and you just feel like, okay, this is how you're supposed to feel. You know, if you don't know any better,
Right.
then judging that is very difficult. And so I think you really need to at some point feel truly great, so you have a baseline, you know, and say, okay, if I eat this, this is not feeling good, you know, this, I might have felt good in the past like that, but now I know that this is not good, you know, I know that I can feel better.
Right. Right. So that, when, at what point did those digestive issues clear up? When that,
Really
like the
with paleo,
paleo.
because the idea of paleo that we had, I mean, now, you know, you can make everything paleo, you know, desserts and cakes and everything is paleo, you know, as long as,
Right.
you know, the ingredients are paleo friendly. Disregarding really the idea of a true Paleolithic diet, meaning something that mimics how our ancestors, you know, ate for millions of years, right? And so when we started paleo, for us that meant typically steak and grilled zucchini. You know, that was our paleo meal. And so that's kind of, you know, I mean, if you remove the seeds and the skin, then it's an animal-based meal at the end of the day. We didn't do that. We ate it with the skin and with the seeds, but they didn't truly affect us. But once we started paleo, all of my digestive issues were gone. And then funny enough, as we, I guess, progressed into the modern paleo movement, and especially then when I started keto, where you have like, you know, your keto cookies and your keto, again, everything can be keto, you know, even if it's crap ingredients.
Right.
My issues reoccurred, and I'm like, how is that possible? My diet is getting better, but my issues are coming back. And then I realized, well, it's probably because of all the, you know, keto friendly or paleo friendly, you know, nuts and seeds and what have you.
Processed food. It's
exactly
processed.
processed. At the end of the day, it's processed food, you know. And so
Yeah.
by removing that again, the issues, you know, disappeared. And so I'm like, okay, so it's, you know,
Whole
stay
food.
away from most plants and processed stuff, and you're fine, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really, for most people, if they could just get rid of the processed stuff,
Yeah.
and really eat, like you said, animal based, or meats, fish, and some whole food, and just go with, and then once you get that kind of squared away, figure out which whole foods you digest well, and
Right.
work and perform well on, and which ones you don't, and just start, you know, eliminating the ones that make you feel bad. But it's like, that should be, I think it's a process for a lot of people that have come through that, you know, looking for that optimal health. But you know, like you said, when you feel those symptoms you thought were normal go away, and
Yeah.
then they return, you recognize, whoa, this is not ideal. And so that's when your body signals you, red, you know, the red flashing lights, like, well, watch out, this is not what we want. It's not what we're used to. That the processed foods, I mean, I think they're the downfall. I mean, even with healthy ones, like you said, the keto ones, the paleo ones, you're going to get those oils sneaking in there that we know we're not supposed to, you know, we don't want. The oxidized oils that cause all the inflammation and the sick fat cells. And it's just, by the time you compress something and grind it up into a powder and pack it into a little bar or cookie or snack thing, certainly it's going to have an impact on your blood sugar when it's ground into dust and then repacked. You know, I mean, I don't care what it started out as. If you grind it that fine, you have just turned it into an easily digested item, right?
Exactly.
And so beyond the blood sugar, though, the ingredients just got garbage. They can sneak so much in there, and your digestive tract's going.
And in some cases, you would consume significantly more than, you know, like if you take, you know, even something
For sure.
I would consider an okay snack, like, sweet plantain chips, fried in coconut, in extra virgin coconut oil or whatever. But if you look at the amount of chips that you eat,
Yeah.
how many bananas that would, or how many plantains that would be, you would never eat, 2 plantains. At least I have never done that. But
Your
if you
stomach would
keep,
be
snacking,
yeah,
exactly, you can
exactly.
easily get to that because they're smaller in volume, obviously, because they're fried, all the moisture is out,
Yeah.
And so, and the same with nut butter, or nut oils, or any oil really for that matter. I mean, if you squeeze, oil out of seeds, how many seeds do you need to get 1 tablespoon, of oil?
Right.
It's ridiculous, So it's maybe not if you have like a spoon of seeds every so often from an omega-6 perspective, maybe not an issue, but a spoon of the seeds oil, a whole different ballgame because it's much more concentrated.
For sure. For sure. Whereas if you just even fried the plantains in butter, now, like they do in Costa Rica so well,
Right.
you know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
And have a little, I mean, you're not going to eat two. I mean, you'd be hard pressed. I mean, you'd be
Right.
you'd be full. And if you're
Yeah.
eating meat with that,
Right.
it's just a nice side item. It's a nice
Right.
little bit of energy. Tasty bit of energy, sweet energy, but it's just, like you said, you're not going to go through nearly as much as a processed item, calorically, or in terms of how much oil and fat you're eating. So for sure, it's too easy, I think, to name and sell something that is just, in the name of, people go for it in the name of convenience.
Right.
But really, I mean, if you're being honest with yourself, it's not the same as eating a whole food. It's just, you're better off just grabbing the piece of fruit and some beef jerky and if you really need a quick meal. But so now, as you said, you guys have 2 kids. How does that work with your family dynamic? I mean, obviously I know kids will eat meat. My son can, go through a bunch of, he loves meat, but he also likes other stuff. You know what I mean?
Right.
He loves other foods. So how do you integrate that with family, kids? There's, schools, friends, and the parties and that kind of thing. I mean, it's really, I think, tricky because you don't want to make your kids feel odd, right?
But
but at the same time, you want them to have the best nourishment they can because you know what that means for them.
Right.
So how have you guys managed that with your?
I mean, we've tried a couple of different strategies with them. At home, it's fairly easy, or at least for us, it was fairly easy because our 2-year-old transitioned to paleo when she was 2. Even though I still have photos of her like chewing on a big chunk of white bread, from before that. Horrible, but that's in the past, fortunately. But then as we transitioned to paleo, so did she. And then our son was born when we were already fully into paleo/keto. In fact, I think it was the early early keto time when he was born. And then he got, started right with eating how we ate as soon as he started eating solids, of course. So for him, it was a little bit easier than for her, I think, getting that sweet tooth out and getting that I guess disturbed palate at the end of the day from all the carbs and stuff that she had before. Not that she ever had any candy or anything, but just, regular foods, that are processed carbs at the end of the day, she did have. But at some point, we simply decided, you know what, we only gonna have at home what we want them to eat, with certain exceptions, obviously, like coffee or alcohol or stuff that's for the adult, so to say. Most everything else, we said, you know what, if it's at home, then they can have it. There are still certain, I guess, rules we have, like eat your protein first before you touch your your carbs and stuff like that. But for the most part, we try to make it as frictionless as possible at home. And we explained them, especially the older ones. The 6-year-old, he is still in la la land. He doesn't really care, why we do certain things. But our 8-year-old, she understands why we do certain things, and she certainly sees that we want, when we walk around, how the physique of other people is versus ours, and how that, why so many people can't even run up a flight of stairs, or even in her school already, where some kids are overweight and stuff. So we talk to her about what are the reasons for that and why we are doing what we're doing, so we don't end up in those situations where it's either then expensive to treat an issue that could have been prevented, or just degrade the quality of our lives. We want to be fit and able to do things for as long as possible, you know. And she understands that. And then whenever we have events, in the past, we would simply say, you know what, instead of you eating that birthday cake or getting the, you know, traditional kids' birthday food, which is pizza, at least here in Georgia,
Right.
we bring our own, you know. And in some cases that meant, you know, getting her at least a couple of years ago, before we cut out nuts and seeds for the most part, it was a paleo friendly pizza made with almond flour. Was that any better than the wheat flour? I don't know. But at least we tried to, you know, do it a little bit better, while she would still be able to, you know, have something similar. Or my wife would cook her a special, you know, coconut flour cupcake that she would bring instead of eating the cake. And then as the years progressed and they really got into a routine of eating, you know, right 90 or at home 95% of the time, we said, you know, those 2 birthday parties a year or whatever that you want to go to, if you want to have that slice of pizza, you know, you have that slice of pizza, because it's not gonna matter in the grander scheme of things. You know, your body is healthy enough to handle that quote unquote poison.
Right.
And at the same time, you know, every 2 months or so, I have a regular pizza. I mean, it's made with olive, you know, there are no seed oils in there. It's, you know, only with olive oil and made here in a local, you know, store that I know how they make stuff. But it's at the end of the day, regular pizza. You know, it's not great food by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
But if I can do that to me, then why, you know, I cannot tell my kid, hey, you know, you can't have that 3 times a year, you know. And so they can have that. And they typically have to decide between the pizza and the cake, you know. So you're not going to get all the junk food. You can decide between one of those 2, and then, you know, and they're okay with it. And we had a couple of conversations, especially with her, where she said, you know, she feels, you know, different and left out if she's the only one not sitting at the table and drinking the juice box and having the pizza. And I'm like, well, you know, here is what we can do. You know, if you want to pick that pizza, then know that it's not good for you. But if you want to make that decision, because it makes you feel better, do it. You're obviously not going to have the juice box, and you're not going to have the cake. But if the pizza is what you want to have, then go for it. You know, you're doing well with every other meal. That one time is not going to make a difference. I mean, you know, unless you're, you know, celiac or whatever, and you can't have, and you really shouldn't have that pizza.
Right.
But, you know, if you're a healthy individual, you know, making those exceptions once in a while, I don't think is an issue anymore. I used to be much more strict with myself. Like if I would go to even if it was a company dinner or whatever, you know, and if there was no stuff that I would want to eat, I didn't eat, you know, period. I was that odd guy, you know, that weirdo who really was, you know, strict for the sake of being strict. I'm not like that anymore. I understand that, you know, if you make the right choices most of the time, those few exceptions are not going to derail you.
Right.
And so,
right.
But
For
really
sure.
at home, not having at home what I shouldn't eat, you know, if you have candy in the pantry, you know, how could you explain to the kid, you know, why we have it at home, but you shouldn't be eating it? You know, who is eating it? Am I eating it? Why am I eating it? You know, if it's not good for you, don't have that stuff at home what you don't want your kids to eat. That's really the most frictionless way of doing it. And in terms of like, you know, when we have meals and they're like, but I don't want to eat this. I'm like, well, you know, the good news is you have a choice. Don't eat, or eat what's, you know, what's served. What's being served. You always have the choice of not eating, you know, not that I want to make my kids fast, but if they choose to, I'm perfectly fine with that, you know.
Sure. Yeah, that's not going to hurt them. That's not going to hurt them
No.
as much as eating something that, you know,
Right.
like you said, the pizza. No, it's a good habit to have. You know, you have a choice,
Right.
but yeah, that's and both can be good, but
right. And because you said choice, I think especially for smaller kids, I think one of the things that I struggle most with is they feel like they are being controlled by the parents, and that's what it is, you know, because we try to, you know, control them so they can make the right choices. But if you give them a choice, even if it's between 2 of the things that you want them to eat, they still feel like they have a choice, you know. Choose between, you know, the salmon and choose between the steak. Your choice, you know. So at least they feel like they can make a choice, even if it's not the one that they would have chosen. But it's a choice nonetheless, you know, instead of saying you have to eat that steak and there is nothing else you can have. That's also something that we have seen makes it sometimes a little bit more complicated to prep meals, because there are choices suddenly and not just what's on the plate. but it reduces friction. And if you're struggling with your kids, making better food choices, removing what they shouldn't have from your home and giving them healthy choices,
Mhm.
that's something that has worked for us.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I have 4 kids, and 3 of them are adults at this point, but one little one's still around, and those choices, giving them that freedom to choose like that, it does reduce the friction.
Yeah.
Especially you can control the choices. You can control the
Right.
choices, but
Yeah.
it's but definitely allows them some of that autonomy that they're really
Right.
trying to grow into anyway. That's what you want to grow. You want to
Yeah.
raise them to make choices and to have that autonomy. So it's not, everything is not just what's set in front of them, and they grow into choosing on their own. And I think the biggest part of that is setting an example in your own
Exactly.
life. And that's probably the bigger influence, because at some point, like you said, you were eating, or you weren't healthy, 15 years ago. It was the standard American diet. That you came to where you are out of need, out of searching, and a desire to be healthy, realizing, oh wow, I see this for what it is, this diet for what it is. This is going to take me the wrong direction. I want to go the right direction. And you chose the direction, and you found the food that took you in that direction.
Right.
Kids, they don't see the consequences. They don't see that. They can't see yet what you saw. And they may have to go through a time as they're adults where they suddenly feel the need to be healthier, as they move on from us and they do their own thing. Kids they go different directions. I've seen that myself. But when they realize, what, this is not serving me, this is not helpful to me, oh wait, my health is, being affected by this, the way I'm eating, why is this something happening? They're going to know, one, how they were raised, two, they're going to see it in their parents.
Right.
Because like you said, you guys are not going to look like all their other friends' parents. You don't now. You're certainly not going to 10 or 15 years from now.
Yeah.
And you're going to stand out. And I can, it makes a difference they'll see it. Your 8-year-old, 9-year-old is already noticing that. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That she's already seeing that. They'll become more pronounced when they're teenagers and they get into college. You're going to hear that a lot more. Their friends are going to be commenting about her parents. Right. They're going to be they're going to comment like, oh my gosh, why does your dad look, how your mom look like that? Why, wow, your parents are in such good shape, because their parents are getting fat and sick. Right. And nearly dead, just like the movie, right?
Exactly.
Because most people hit their 50s, they're on a small handful of medications for their blood pressure, for their blood sugar, for some sort of pain, some digestion, maybe some sort of antidepressant, because they're not getting the nourishment that they need. And they can't handle the stress, or they're hitting alcohol so much because their body, they don't feel good. So they need to medicate and make themselves feel better at the end of the day. And, that example is something that I think stays with them. Like they see it, even if they don't totally acknowledge it, when they come to that point in their life where they have to make a decision, as adults, they're going to know, it's going to have already been mapped out for them. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's a brilliant example to give to your kids of all things. It's like how to live healthy in this world where we have all the messages, everything they're hearing at school, they're hearing from friends, they're hearing in commercials, on social media, is taking in the opposite direction many times. Right. Yeah. So to have that lesson lived out for them at home, that's invaluable. You know what I mean? So that's great. You guys have created that. You created a culture for it. Yeah, exactly. And also, sometimes we intentionally, let them make, a wrong choice, because they, especially our younger one, I mean, he was born at 30 weeks and 6 days, so he was way premature. Oh, wow. And I mean, he's fortunately healthy and all, but for example, and I'm not sure if it's related at all, but I kind of feel like there are certain things, like maybe, his allergies in summer, or his inability to digest eggs or dairy,
might be related to, his prematurity. And so, he knows that if he has eggs, and that's unfortunate because we have, our own chickens. And so we,
Right.
have our own supply of eggs, but he can't have them. He gets, loose stools. And, every so often when, Kathy makes something that happens to have eggs and he's like, oh, I really want to have them. Like, Lucas, you can have it, but you're going to have, digestive issues. If you want to make that call, if you want to, again, remind yourself what the consequence is, do it, because if you have not experienced it in a while, you might, it's all the stuff that happened, bad stuff that happened in the past doesn't seem so bad anymore if it was a while ago, right?
Right.
And so, we let him, experience and like, hey, you know what? Maybe it wasn't such a great idea, and so also helping him to understand and to be in tune with his own body, if I do A, B is the consequence, if I do something different, it's going to be likely a different, consequence. And so allowing them to really learn to listen to their body, and especially if they start, showing interest in sports. We have friends, and they're like, they do dance and everything, and they tell them, hey, if you want to perform well, you better feed your body well. If you want to be on top of your game, if you want to be better than anyone else, you have to eat better and sleep better and manage your stress better and do all of those things better than anyone else, or at least do it to your best of your ability, so you can be the best version of yourself. If that's going to, that means you're going to beat someone or not is a different story, but at least you did your best. And that could also be a motivation for maybe at least for older kids or teenagers or whatever, if they really want to excel at their sport, make them understand what you put into your body is going to directly influence that performance.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, especially, and that's a great motivator for sports, because it's such a competitive place right now with so many kids are in club sports, doing sports in school, and if they're really into that, if that's something that's a big goal for them, then that's a great motivator other than the parents.
Right. Exactly.
Right? It's someone, it's like there's something besides you moving them that direction. That's internal, that's innate in them. That's like, it's driving them forward. Now you're not a trainer, but you do a lot. You have a very successful, I think, health blog. I mean, you basically take what many would consider confusing or maybe complex health information and sort of distill it down into something a little more easily compatible or what's the word I'm thinking? Consumable by your readers. So as well as a YouTube channel. So you've done a lot of reviews for like cold plunges and I'm assuming you're talking about your diet and so forth on that. So that's michaelkummer.com, correct?
Correct. Yep.
So what else? What's your typical kind of blog post? I mean, what are the subject matter that you talk about? Is it really specifically a lot your diet with a few reviews that kind of help with biohacking and just kind of improved health, or what is that usually?
Yeah, it really depends. I mean, it goes anywhere from product reviews of stuff that I'm using, be it, this, all the gadgets that I'm trying out and seeing how they could potentially help me, optimize my health, be it, diets, specific foods that I've tried, but also, general topics about, like why you shouldn't be eating, too many polyunsaturated fatty acids, in particular linoleic acid, so kind of diving more into those pure nutritional aspects that most people are simply unaware of, especially if you, go by mainstream advice, then PUFAs are good for you. And obviously they are, essential in many ways, but the amounts, it's again the nuance and the context, the amounts of PUFAs that we consume, in our modern lives is nowhere near where it's way more than what it really should be and has been from an evolutionary perspective, right? So diving into those like nutritional topics, diving into the science, and making sense of it, giving like just tips on where to start. Like I have one blog post that talks about how to live a healthy lifestyle, just generally speaking, diet, fitness, sleep, stress, tribalism, all of those things that are fundamental to our health. I try to share and give my spin on it, and also explain how we apply those in the Kummer household, because it's one thing, if you're a lone warrior, to do certain things might be a little bit easier than if you have, a partner and kids and, pets or what have you.
Right.
Maybe, your mother-in-law living with you, what have you, it becomes a little bit more involved and complex. And so I try to not only talk about what the issue is and what the solution is, but how it can be applied practically, and how you can get from A to B, sort of as a journey. You don't try to go from the standard American diet to maybe where you are or I am overnight. I mean, some people can pull it off, and if you can, my respects. But for many, it's a journey, and I'm sure you're still on a journey like I am. I don't pretend I know it all, and this is going to be the last type of dietary framework that I've ever tried.
Right.
I'm evolving with the information that I learn, and with based on how I feel and how my environment changes.
Right.
And so
Absolutely.
sharing that, how it goes along the way, what works, what hasn't worked, what worked in the past but I don't do it anymore, and why is that? Those are all things that I share on my blog.
Gotcha. Oh yeah, I've definitely found as I've gotten older, there's certain things that didn't bother me before, they bother me now, and I've had to eliminate them. I have to reduce them. And so that's a normal, that's just part of life. You know what I mean? That's just, we can't tolerate certain things at a certain point, or we just found that our body no longer, says, hey, you know what, this isn't serving you anymore. Time to eliminate this, but we need more of this. We need more of this item. And if you're really, like I said, you are going after optimal health, you want to live, have a longer health span, not just live longer, but be healthy longer. You make those choices. You make those choices for yourself. So that's fantastic. And you have a product. You also have I know it's, I mean, we talk about, I know you and I both eat organ meats, liver and hearts, but you have a product for people who can't quite stomach the taste of liver, right? Is it a freeze-dried liver product? Is that
correct? Yes, it's freeze-dried beef liver, sourced from New Zealand cattle. So basically all the meets all the criteria of a high quality product, obviously. And the reason why I decided to launch my own product was, well, several reasons really. First of all, it's something that I consume every day. I want my family to consume every day. But having fresh liver on your plate every day is not only difficult from a supply chain perspective, right? But also I'm the only one who would eat it,
Right. I can relate.
And so, what, I want to have something that, I see myself using for the rest of my life. Maybe in 10 years, I'm going to look back and say, that was a stupid statement to make, but I think that I'll be eating organs for the rest of my life, because there are clear benefits to doing so. And so I wanted to come up with something that's easy to consume for anyone, regardless of whether or not you like the taste of liver, in a small capsule, and do it in the most sustainable manner. Meaning, instead of using plastic, which most supplements use as a container, use glass, metal lids, and also just get into the learning what it means to source and manufacture and sell a physical product, and something that I'm willing to put into my body every day, and that I give my kids. And so that's how we came up with that last July, actually. And it's going really well. I mean, there seems to be now, fortunately, a lot of demand. A lot of people have woken up to the idea that maybe plants aren't the greatest sources of micronutrients. Maybe organs are better. And so there are a lot of great companies out there that do exactly that, and an incredibly huge market, because still most people don't eat organs, don't even know why they would,
Right.
And so there is a lot of opportunity, I think, to spread the message and to, at the end of the day, get people healthier by at least ensuring that they get all the micronutrients that they need, even if they continue eating stuff they maybe shouldn't. But you can make the argument, is the problem of crab food because it's void of nutrients, or because there is something in there that's detrimental to your health? It's probably both to a degree, but if you at least can take care of the micronutrient needs,
right,
I think you have one half of the battle. It's not a shortcut, obviously. It's not something that, you do that and then, just
Right.
go about
Ice cream and pizza. Right. Yeah.
exactly.
No.
But I think it's a good first step to include organs in your diet. And of course, if you can do it fresh, that's the best way. Raw, probably the best way to do it. You don't destroy any nutrients. I don't know that many people who eat raw liver or raw anything really.
Right.
But
There were a few in Costa Rica. I mean, there were
yeah,
a few of us in Costa Rica this last trip. I mean, that was the whole room started tasting some form of raw organs. But I mean, it's an odd group. It's an unusual
yeah,
group, and that's why they're there.
yeah,
I mean,
not
so
the majority.
yeah, it's not the majority at all. And a lot of them that was their first time they'd ever done it, even though they were like,
Yeah,
all in on the diet. They're still consuming many of, like a product like yours, or they're cooking it most of the time. The raw one
right.
was like, well, this is interesting. It might be the first and last time I ever taste a raw spleen, a raw heart, a raw testicle, that kind of thing,
Right.
and liver being passed around. But yeah, that's not typical. So I think I agree with you 100%. If you can find something that is more palatable
Yeah,
to your average consumer and get those micronutrients, liver being the most micronutrient dense, beef liver especially, most
right.
micronutrient dense
Yeah,
food on the planet. You really can't put anything up against a ruminant liver.
right.
It's
Yeah.
like it's full of micronutrients.
Yeah. And it's not a filter of toxins in the sense that it
No.
stores stuff. That's really one of the things that I hear a lot from, but isn't liver, full of toxins because it filters the blood and stuff? I'm like, yeah, that's not really how it works, you don't get all the crap by eating liver, you get predominantly the good stuff.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a vitamin
yeah,
source. It's a source
yeah,
of nutrients for our body, and it's sent out in packages of, this, but we send
yeah,
out vitamin A, D, E, K from our liver to the rest of the
right.
body. We send
Yeah,
out, there's so many choline, there's so many micronutrients that are packaged and disseminated through our bodies through the liver. And when you have something like a beef, a ruminant, cow
right,
or bison or whatever ruminant you choose, and it's eating grass all day and turning that into, I mean, it's got a clean diet, so to speak,
right. Yeah,
and it's turning that into micronutrients, which are packed in its liver. It's just, I mean, it's not like it's a human who's going eating pizza, then having a drink after work, and then frozen yogurt after their workout.
right,
This thing's eating grass all day.
right.
So its liver.
Yeah,
What toxins? It's
right.
full of nutrients.
Yeah,
So, you really have, when it comes to a micronutrient source, that's gold on
yeah.
this planet. That's gold.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
So yeah, you
funny
definitely.
enough is there are every supplement company obviously makes the claims about the benefits and all. And when I saw, since I guess when I started eating liver, I was already fairly healthy, I want to say.
Yeah.
And so I didn't expect a whole lot of changes. I didn't suffer from hair loss. I didn't have low iron. I didn't have low energy. I was on top of my game already because I was eating relatively well,
Mhm.
or really well, really. And then, but you hear from people who have micronutrient deficiencies, who are low on B vitamins, low on iron, low on what have you, and suddenly, they see that in the dramatic change in energy, and hair loss is stopping, and all those transformations that I'm like, that you would never believe,
Right.
but if you hear it then directly, I'm like, oh wow, this is incredible,
Right.
and obviously this is not because of my product, it's the liver, regardless of where you get it from, and whether you eat it freeze dried or raw, or even if you eat it cooked, it doesn't really matter. The fact that liver has such a profound, or can have a profound impact on especially those that have a less than ideal diet and that are micronutrient deficient, it's unbelievable, and so I would really recommend anyone, just go to, even if you go only to Whole Foods, and get those air chilled chicken livers. I mean, it's not a ruminant obviously, but that's a better than no liver.
It is. Yeah.
And then White Oak and all of those great companies out there that produce regeneratively raised beef, and get the liver from there. Give it a try. Add some liver, and you likely will notice a dramatic difference in terms of how you feel, and what your body is capable of.
For sure. 100%. Yeah. If you're missing those things, yeah, I've heard those stories as well. The difference is remarkable. I mean, they just feel better.
Right.
And like you and I have been optimized for a while.
Right.
And so it's subtle differences. We make subtle changes. It's
Yeah.
subtle differences. We're trying to like tweak and fine tune. Someone who's come from a standard American diet and starts introducing, eliminating a few toxins and introducing some micronutrient dense food like liver, can have a dramatic difference in how they feel and their performance and sleep. Like you said, hair loss, it's amazing. It's just digestive health, like as you experience when you clean up your diet. That's probably the biggest one I hear, is the digestive distress that people had for much of their life.
Yeah.
And then they go on this type, like an animal-based whole food diet, and they start getting the micronutrients they need and get rid of some of those toxins. And suddenly they're digesting food like without pain, without discomfort, without trouble.
Yeah.
Huge problem.
Yeah.
Huge problem. We don't even realize someone can look healthy, as you did, can look healthy on the outside, healthy, fit, lean on the outside. And I hear it from a lot of athletes, but they have digestive problems.
Right. Yeah.
And I mean, the only thing that's wrong with them that you could pinpoint, though wrong with them, but the only variable that could be improved is many times what they're eating.
Right.
Because they've got everything else optimized. They've got their sleep optimized, they've got their fitness optimized. They're genetically, in many cases, very, very gifted, or certainly not deficient but it's the diet. And
I can totally relate to it, because when I was in my early 20s and I was, a professional athlete, I was ripped. I had 8% body fat. I went to the, world championships, at my age group and stuff, but I had IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. And
wow.
I did, more or less everything right, except, I had no clue about what to eat. I just ate what, everyone else was eating too.
Right.
And removing that, and funny enough, that was almost 20 years ago. And now that I am 40, I'm actually stronger and fitter than I was in my early 20s. And that should not be possible, regardless of how you spin it, a 20-year-old should be in better shape, doing the same things, in terms of working on it, etc., than a 40-year-old. And and what has changed is, well, my diet, my lifestyle, it's more conducive to optimal health than it was 20 years ago.
That's amazing. That's awesome. Great. Michael, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to link to your blog and your YouTube channel as well. It was great stuff there in the show notes. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing your story. We've been talking about doing this since Costa Rica, since July, and I'm glad we finally got a chance to do it. But thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Have a great week.